And this administration today, here and now, declares unconditional war on poverty in America.
Our origin story is incredible. In the 1960s, or specifically in 1964, the federal government established the Office of Economic Opportunity. And its goal was to address the widespread poverty that was happening in the 60s.
Poverty is a national problem, requiring improved national organization and support.
They established several different programs throughout the country to address that. And one of them was, for the first time, the federal government was funding attorneys throughout the country to challenge the legal structures that were perpetuating both racial injustice and poverty at the time.
Guaranteed by law, were available to everyone.
And it is with that, in 1966, that Legal Services of Greater Miami opened its doors in Liberty City. It was 9 attorneys dedicated to doing this work.
There was a lot of resistance to legal services in the beginning. The establishment, of course, was not happy that people could fight for their rights and stand up and not be rolled over. And so it was difficult to get the judges to accept the legal services lawyers, to get the bar to accept the legal services lawyers.
I first encountered legal services in the mid-'60s when they started, and in some places, even in Dade County, it was viewed with some suspicion by some members of the bar. I used to joke about it that I was seen as a spy. There was a lot of concern that giving legal services to people would infringe on the economic capabilities of members of the bar. That wasn't so in any concept. Met a lot of wonderful people and enjoyed it, and came to believe very strongly that it was performing an extraordinarily vital service here in our community, and I'd do anything personally I could to make sure that it succeeded.
Fourth, we're not trying to replace lawyers with social workers or laymen. But rights should be understood and honored by all citizens, even without the intervention of a lawyer. And we are interested in getting legal knowledge and legal services to all citizens.
I mean, the Community Action Agency was from Johnson's War on Poverty, and they still exist today. And they have centers all around the community, and those centers, they have social workers and services, and Sergeant Shriver saw that a necessary complement to that would be to have a legal component.
Leaders of both parties complained that legal services and community action were a bunch of Boston Tea Parties, and they were dumbfounded. Shriver dared to give federal money to the poor to sue local governments.
It's a continuum of services, and we're part of a lot of continuum of services now. We have networks with a lot of community organizations, so when they hit a roadblock, they come to legal services. We have partnerships with them. And so Sergeant Shriver saw that, and that's when the funding was made available, and that's when a small group of lawyers here applied for that funding.
Sergeant Shriver was an integral part of legal services success. He was the architect.
There certainly is plenty of abject poverty in the United States if one wants to look for it.
Of all the national programs Sergeant Shriver created, legal services would become the most influential and the most controversial.
The poor need and deserve the same quality of legal services that the profession owes to all citizens.
It's not a war on poverty anymore. It's really a mission to make sure that all vulnerable populations are protected. You know, with the 60s, there were civil rights, Martin Luther King, integration of public schools. So there was a time when there was a lot of movement and change.
I came because I was in Mississippi representing civil rights workers with an ACLU organization called Lawyers Constitutional Defense Committee. The tensions, and especially race, of course, was the predominant factor then. It raised the awareness of the need to provide people with basic needs. So food stamp programs and legal service programs.
For the first time in the history of this country, poor people actually have a place and a way in which to express themselves. That's community action.
Shriver secured the backing of the American Bar Association, and he recruited attorneys Earl Johnson and Clint Bamberger to run the program. Hundreds of young lawyers responded to their appeal to bring justice and opportunity to America's poor.
Some people have to be dedicated, by God or by themselves, to help the poor who most need help. And that's what we're doing.
The need for justice and the need for every citizen to have equal access to the legal system. It was in February of 1965 that one letter got the ball rolling in Dade County. And on April 27, 1966, Legal Services of Greater Miami began its work of making sure that the protections guaranteed by law were available to everyone.
So when we opened our doors in 1966, the legal issues we were addressing probably wouldn't surprise you. It was housing, consumer protection, access to government benefits. What we as attorneys do is help our clients access rights and benefits to which they are legally entitled to. And so it is integral to the working of democracy that people have access to lawyers.
Society changed, and people became more attuned to fairness for everybody. And private lawyers began to respect the work we were doing and joined with us. We had a huge number of private lawyers doing pro bono work with us. So we humanized the law for a lot of those lawyers, and as they became more familiar with our work and respected our work, we became a more respected institution and earned the financial support as well of the legal and the corporate community.
So Legal Services of Greater Miami was part of that first national wave of federally funded attorneys. Our first grant from the Office of Economic Opportunity, I think, was $200,000.
Howard Dixon was the original executive director.
And because of its technical nature, not too many legislatures understand that our landlord and tenant law is basically agrarian and feudal.
And I was an intern in the office while he was the director. That's how I started.
There was no commitment from the government to make the programs work, to make them work in a way that will really make a difference. They're just throwing some money into a program to make it look like they want to make some changes.
Howard wrote me a letter offering me a job at Legal Services of Greater Miami. And I was ready to leave Mississippi. I'd been there for 2.5 years. And so I came down.
And very quickly, the young and brazen attorneys that were working in our office were having major impact, not only serving individual clients and changing their lives for the better, but even going to the U.S. Supreme Court.
Well, I started Legal Services in 1969. Legal Services was just a new program.
Legal Services back then was a new thing. As any new thing, it challenged convention. And as a result, it got a lot of pushback. Got pushback from courts who were not used to seeing poor people come in with lawyers. Got pushback from other lawyers who were not used to seeing brash, bright young lawyers representing poor people.
Fuentes versus Chevin was the case that was brought by Bruce Rogo and then also by Rene Marais.
So Fuentes versus Chevin changed the replevin laws in the whole country. People would buy things on time. Mrs. Fuentes bought a stereo and a stove from Firestone, and she apparently fell behind, Firestone felt, in her payments.
Fuentes was Margarita Fuentes, a Cuban lady living in Little Havana. And Firestone, there was a retail store at 12th Street and First Avenue. Firestone goes to court, signs an affidavit, she hasn't paid, sheriff comes out, takes it away.
You could go to the circuit court and merely file a statement saying that somebody had failed to make their payments and take the stereo and stove. And she never had a chance to be heard.
Took 2 years until we got a decision on June 12, 1972.
As a result of the Fuentes versus Chevin case, the right to due process before property was seized through Rule 11 was established in the courts.
And that's just one of many cases that legal services took and to the Supreme Court of the United States. Some we lost, some we won, but they were very impactful rates.
I don't think any other program had as many cases in the Supreme Court of the United States as we had.
There was a recognition that these kind of things, trying to take care of institutional problems. It used to be that if you got arrested for a misdemeanor, you would be in jail. If you couldn't make bond, you would be in jail for 2 or 3 weeks until they got around to taking you to court. And so I attacked that in a case called Ackes versus Purdy. You've got Argersinger, you've got Gerstein versus Pugh, you got several other cases that we had. But these were major contributions.
Throughout our history, we have had significant cases which have had systemic impact beyond the individual clients we serve. That was true early on when we had attorneys in the early 70s going to the U.S. Supreme Court to argue on behalf of their clients, to even more recently in previous decades.
Through the years, legal services became respected for their professionalism, for their knowledge, for their talent, and many people who are now in prominent positions as judges or congressmen or mayors or other positions of authority, they started their legal career at legal services, and most of them say it was the best legal experience of their life.
It was exciting every day to come to work. I mean, it was just like, wow. In the early 1970s, when legal services of Miami was hot, I mean, we were turning this town upside down, and it was exciting. The battles were tough, but the victories were sweet. My name is Harold Taliaferro Smith. I'm known as H.T. Smith. I'm proudly a professor and the director of the Trial Advocacy Program at FIU College of Law. And I'm a trial lawyer with my own practice, H.T. Smith, PA. I went to segregated schools that was second class from kindergarten to 12th grade. I applied to a university in February of 1964. I still haven't gotten a response. The first time America said I could go to the front of the line was the beeline to the jungles of Vietnam to fight. And as I was beginning to graduate, I started looking for jobs and found out that no white law firm in Miami had ever hired a black lawyer. So I went to the legal services because, one, I like representing the underdog, and two, I saw at least a glimmer of hope for some type of upward mobility when I left legal services. This was the golden age of legal services because at that time our hands were not tied as relate to the types of cases we could handle. I knew we would be representing the least, the last, the lost, the looked over and the left out, but I didn't know we could represent them against Burdine's department store, represent them against the police department, represent them against big landlords that own hundreds and hundreds of apartments, buildings, etc. So I got right into the civil rights aspect of legal services, and we raised holy hell, and we ensured that the people we represented, one, we cared about, and two, they got the same level of legal representation as the rich, the powerful, and the famous. And that was our calling card.
The 70s were an interesting time for legal services, probably for the country as a whole, but for legal services particularly because in 1974, Nixon signed the Legal Services Act.
And that became the funding vehicle for legal services programs in every state and in every community.
And it created the Legal Services Corporation, which now funds the 140 plus grantees throughout the country, of which we are one.
And that's when the name was changed to Legal Services of Greater Miami. And the Legal Services Corporation was supposed to bring some stability to legal services, and it created a national structure which provided training and support for the local program.
So in the 80s, there were significant challenges in funding, as the Legal Services Corporation was the primary funder of Legal Services of Greater Miami at the time.
Once Legal Services was established and took root and grew, our eyes opened and the doors opened to a whole universe of people who needed justice.
As America entered the 1980s, the president and some in Congress held a different view of legal services.
It's a program the Reagan administration would like to cut from the $321 million it gets this year down to zero.
The Miami office has $1.5 million a year operating budget. Legal Services attorney Lincoln Diaz-Balart says poor people would be victimized by Reagan's proposal.
The real problem is, what do the clients do? Come October 1st or whenever this program would be effectively eliminated, the clients would have, the poor people in civil matters would have no access to the courts. They would have no access to the laws and to justice in the United States.
Millions of Americans can't find a lawyer at a reasonable cost, or they're afraid of what lawyers will do to them. For them, our system of legal services is a system of legal disservice.
During the 90s, there was a lot of change in the organization, not only because at the federal level there were significant changes to our funding and what we were permitted to do, but there was also changes for us locally in what we were able to achieve.
Someone who was very involved who was external was Chesterfield Smith, who was a national figure and the founder of Holland and Knight, and he took us under his wing.
On the urgent need to improve the delivery of legal services to many Americans of similar economic circumstances, experiencing similar frustrations with the law and with lawyers.
I'm Tiffany Lee. I am the Deputy Managing Partner of Holland and Knight. You know, I was introduced to legal services when I was a baby lawyer. Chesterfield Smith, the founder of Holland and Knight, who had been a long advocate for legal services for the poor, and at that time, the way he talked about the organization and what it did made me understand how important it was and that I wanted to be a part of it.
That happened during the Reagan era, it happened during the Clinton era. There were huge cutbacks, huge retrenchments, and we realized, wait a minute, can't have all your eggs in one basket. So we began to diversify our funding. We got state and local grants, and then we realized, okay, we got to do some private fundraising. And Chesterfield Smith came in as the chair of the campaign, and he gathered all the top law firms in town in his conference room, and he said, you got to do good, you got to help legal services. And we started a campaign, and we raised money, and we bought a 50,000 square foot office building on Biscayne Boulevard. With our fundraising campaign, we paid off the mortgage. We had a mortgage burning, and we had a place to live forever. Except we were so fortunate, our investment grew almost 20-fold. And we sold the building, bought a less expensive building, created a foundation, an endowment, and once again created another home for nonprofit.
And so what that foundation has given us is an ability to mitigate some of those ups and downs that we may experience with funding crisis. The 90s was also a time where we had a lot of changes, not only because of what we were able to achieve locally in terms of our financial stability and purchasing a building, but also because of our structural changes in our federal funding.
I asked Congress to put politics aside, to follow on this issue the model of the Legal Services Corporation, and give the full funding and support the corporation needs.
Here in Miami, the Legal Services Corporation handles 10,000 cases a year. Its staff has been cut by half. This Sunday morning, we'll see what Legal Services does and the difference it can make in the lives of the poor.
Specifically, as part of welfare reform in 1996, as part of that statute, LSC was placed on it restrictions on what could be done with its funding. It was basically two categories of restrictions. It was clients that we could no longer serve and types of cases or even strategies that we could no longer employ. Not only sustainability of the work that we're doing, but like any business, when you could provide economic stability to your employees and ensure that you are going to be able to retain them long-term and invest in them, they remain here. So it has given us, in a way, the benefit of having employees that have been here 20, 30 years.
This was my first job out of law school. Moved here from Texas 2001 and started practicing representing tenants. At that time, we represented both tenants and we represented homeowners in the housing unit.
My name is Jeff Hearn. I'm the attorney for Idella Finch. I just enjoy representing people who maybe not have the resources to be represented elsewhere, and who, if it wasn't for an organization like Legal Services, Ms. Finch would, be without a home, be homeless.
It's a great way to start out as a lawyer because you're just thrown into cases, you're quickly into litigation, appearing in court very quickly. Legal Services of Greater Miami is an excellent organization to do this work. We have the space to do creative advocacy. We're always trying to look for systemic solutions to our clients' problems where we can fix it not just for the client who's sitting in front of us, but for the entire client community.
Working in legal services impacted me in ways that to this day are important.
Lincoln Diaz-Balart, he was one of the attorneys that I was involved in hiring, and he went on to become a congressman. Daniela Levine Cava, now the mayor of Miami-Dade County.
Not only did I do basic legal work, providing for landlord-tenant or public benefits, but I also started innovative programs that were really in response to critical needs, like helping parents and guardians navigate the school system to make sure their children had the services and the programs that they needed to succeed.
Judge Wilkie D. Ferguson was an attorney, a staff attorney at Legal Services. Judge Leo Adderley was one of the original 9 attorneys at Legal Services in 1966. He then went on, obviously, to sit on the bench, but even before he was on the bench for decades, he served on our board and was president.
And another early pioneer was Gwen Cherry, who later became the first Black woman legislator in the state of Florida.
The landlords that aren't doing what they should do, and the tenants.
There was also a very active board of directors. Bob Parks was one of those people.
It's been a part of my professional experience that I value very much. When I took the oath to be a lawyer, that I also had a responsibility to the public. It wasn't a question of philosophy. It was a question of that's what you signed on to do. And if you didn't like it, you shouldn't be practicing.
Tobias Simon was one of those people.
It's a real accomplishment to have survived changes in administration, changes in philosophy, and I think it shows that both sides of the aisle in Congress recognize how important this is. The odds are just always stacked. There's never enough in the budget to take care of all the worthwhile cases, and it's just the highest thing a lawyer, a law firm, a private corporation can do to even up those odds and to give our clients in the poverty community the same kind of resources that others have.
The fondest memories, it's not any one thing, but it's just the dedication and the creativity of legal services lawyers, because legal services lawyers really just passionately care about helping people with their civil legal problems and helping them to get equal justice. And it doesn't matter who that person is, what language they speak, what ethnic group they are. Legal services lawyers meet their clients where they are.
Legal services have even helped entire communities weather displacement from their homes. What moves me the most about our Legal Services Board is how we recognize that justice isn't a luxury.
We have always had an extremely engaged board of directors that was really dedicated to our mission, and that has made a lasting impact in the organization over time.
So I think the credit really has to go to the lawyers that made it a life career. I mean, Marcia is a great example of that.
This is where I have devoted my career. I look around me and I see all of the talented attorneys who committed their lives, some of them as well, and the non-attorneys. We have support staff who've been here for 20 years, 30 years as well. So it's very inspiring to work with people like this, and it's inspiring to see the kind of successes that we can have in making changes in the community, and I just don't know any other job that would bring me that personal satisfaction.
Monica, somebody else, who is obviously there for the long run.
I myself started here in 2003.
Ms. Molina came to our office because she was denied Social Security benefits due to her immigration status. We actually had several dozen other similarly situated clients in the office. This is just an example of one.
It was the little moms and pops that were being taken advantage of in terms of buying appliances and buying cars and buying or thinking they had bought homes, and people trying to cheat them out of the home. And if I lose the case, he loses his job, they lose the house, they lose the car, and the whole family is destroyed. And so I oftentimes I would be down in county court or in DUI court, and people say, H.T. Smith, you down here in county court? Yeah, because justice is important for people everywhere.
Hello, my name is Michael Harley. I'm a disabled veteran. I've been living at Father Marcus Berry Apartments for the past 4 years. This is a brand new building. I was the first tenant ever to live here, and they wanted to start a tenants association. So I at first didn't want to really get involved, but I ended up getting involved. I became president of the Tenants Association. I suppose management companies do not like tenant associations, so they sort of retaliated against me. I had 7 notices, minor infractions that really never happened. And then they eventually gave me an eviction notice. As far as legal services are concerned, without them, I probably would have never been able to stay here because it would have cost me a lot of money. They work like they're getting $1 million, and I know they're not. And we need to keep legal services out in front because they help people in need. 60 years is remarkable, and they deserve to be around another 60 years.
There's no way if they take this out, there's no way we can get any legal advice because everything else is so expensive, and this is the only possibility that we have of getting legal advice.
If I didn't have this service, I mean, I don't know what will happen to my kids.
The most important legacy for legal services that I see are not just the people that they've helped, but their families. Because it might be an individual that had signed a lease and had an issue with the landlord, whether there's a question whether they were getting the house taken care of properly or whatnot. But you didn't just help that person by getting fair housing. You helped that person's spouse, you helped that person's children. And children that grow up in stable homes and safe homes, they go on to be contributing members of society. They can spend time worrying about getting an education than worrying about, are they going to get evicted from their apartment or their house? So that legacy and the improvement and the growth in the community as a direct result of the representation that legal services provided, that's the thing that's, I think, is legal services' most important legacy.
Legal Services of Greater Miami has got to be, if it's not the best, it's got to be one of the best legal services offices in the country. And that's good for our community, because a lot of people who are in the haves don't understand how important it is for people who are the have-nots to have hope and to have some belief that they'll be treated in a system of justice. You know, we have these great words in our Constitution. We talk about equal justice, but it's got to be real in people's lives.
I'm just very, very proud that Legal Services is now celebrating its 60th anniversary. I would not be standing here as your mayor, but for my experience with Legal Services and what I learned from Legal Services about how to serve this great community. Thank you.
I realized, for example, that rights are somewhat theoretical when they're not accompanied by advice, by counsel, by the ability of people to have a lawyer to come and explain to them what their rights are and how those rights can be translated into action.
It's amazing that Legal Services has been around 60 years. I think the impact is probably exponential, and it will just continue to grow, continue to be smart and strategic in the way that it grows, and by doing so, really increase its impact.
And I'm grateful that this community has not only allowed me to do this, but has supported us in doing this. That's so critical. This continued support from the local bar, from corporations, and as Miami continues to grow, the support from the community continues to grow, and that is incredible and absolutely critical to our success.
It's really very gratifying to see where the organization is at this point, 60 years after it was founded. Even in this day and age when people's interests and values are changing, young attorneys are coming to work with us and are inspired by what we do and continuing on the battle. So there's hope for the future.
No matter what, there'll be a need. There are going to be people who need representation, and the only place they will be able to come will be a legal service program.
Legal Services of Greater Miami was founded on a simple but powerful belief. Access to justice is not a privilege, but a fundamental right. For decades, this organization has stood with people at their most vulnerable moments, when a home was at risk, benefits were denied, or the system felt impossible to navigate alone. Through changing laws, shifting politics, and growing need, Legal Services has remained a constant, a place where rights are defended, dignity is protected, and voices are heard. Our legacy is not just the cases we've won, it's the stability we've helped create. The community's strengthened because someone has an advocate standing beside them. As we look ahead, our mission is urgent and clear. Miami is changing, the cost of living is rising, and legal challenges are becoming more complex. The need for access to justice has never been greater. Moving forward, we will continue to ensure that the promise of justice is real and not just theoretical. We will meet these challenges guided by the same values that have shaped us from the beginning: fairness and an unwavering commitment to equal justice under the law.